Welcome to Game of Growth, your podcast series by Truepush.
You're listening to the episode number 14.
I'm your host, Tina Verma, and today, let's welcome our guest on the show, Ranganathan, who had worked as the CEO at Omnicom Media Group, Singapore and Malaysia. Ranganathan has explored all sorts of corporate adventures for more than 2 decades, and now he has moved on to his other professional jumps. So, Ranganathan, how are you doing today? How is your new normal going on?
Hi, it's lovely talking to you, Tina. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast series. It's been a great day, and quite a lot of changes we have all embraced over time. And the new normal almost seems like a normal for a while now. So it's good. Yeah.
Great. So, Ranga, in your previous stint as the CEO of Omnicom Media Group, how was your journey?
The journey was tough, but was very meaningful. I was overseeing two markets, Malaysia and Singapore. And with these two diverse markets, though they are next to each other, pretty diverse in terms of scale and the nuances. So with these two diverse markets under my oversight, had to apply two distinct leadership styles to pivot the businesses across both markets into a digital at core, fast growing, and a place for people to come to and realize their potential. So I believe, over the last 4 years, when I look back, we are looking at improved employee engagement scores, we are looking at improved client satisfaction scores, and we have achieved most of the KPIs we set out to achieve. So there's a great deal of satisfaction of what we have managed to do in the business over the last 4 years.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what are the impacts does the media publishers are facing because of this pandemic which is going on?
As we all know, it's very highly unpredictable time. Things are changing pretty fast. Consumers are anxious. Businesses are soft. And people are still figuring out what's going on. So it's a very highly unpredictable time. And we saw the second quarter of this calendar year where we saw massive erosion in advertising spends in the industry. And most of the publishers are powered by advertising, right? The economic model is advertising. So depending upon which medium you're representing, there are varying degrees of impact, right? The out-of-home and cinema media owners, they saw their spends getting decimated. No one was going to cinema. People were at home. So activity of these two environments kind of came to a sudden stop. If you were looking at magazines, they were the next ones to be impacted. Massive erosion in magazine readership and subscription, and ADEX happened around this time. And we also saw in our region a couple of big media publishing houses close shop, if you will. So we saw that pressure hit the magazine space. But in terms of newspaper and TV, they had a decline, but at a much slower pace vis-a-vis the other media that I spoke about. And that is mostly thanks to a lot of public service messaging that came from the government as well as businesses or brands to help deal with the COVID situation. So I think TV while it had an impact, it was a softer impact, right? But an interesting thing to note was in the digital space, right? Over the last few years, we've seen that digital has been galloping with double-digit growth, but it saw a sudden slowdown in spends as brands were revisiting their marketing plans and differing spends. So second quarter saw a dip across all sectors and surely affected the media publishers in that space. Having said that, we're already seeing some light at the end of the tunnel with markets easing from the lockdown, consumers coming back to the fore, and this encouraging signals are giving marketers the confidence to invest in brand building and consumer engagement. Another interesting thing that has happened is while the spends have decreased, the audience reach has increased across television and digital, thanks to stay-at-home and work-from-home initiatives. Newspaper readership has gone up as well.
Right.
So what this has done is it has increased the supply of audiences and it is decreased the demand from marketers because they deferred their spend. And this dynamic of increased supply of audiences and decreased demand from marketers has actually created a deflationary trend in media pricing. So it is a very interesting opportunity, meaningful opportunity for marketers who have their act together to actually leverage the current pricing advantage that exists. This will go away pretty fast. But those who are able to respond fast and take advantage of this demand and supply imbalance are going to get very strong pricing advantage, and therefore they can do brand building fast. And regardless how the economy recovers, whether it's a V-shaped or a U-shaped recovery, marketers who have their distribution strategies in place and brand building strategies in place will have a much faster recovery. And this is the opportune moment for them to move back in.
Right. Absolutely. I'm sure every business has taken a hit because of this situation, and all are just trying to come up with solutions to cope up with this pandemic. So, Ranga, Omnicom serves its client in more than 100 countries because, customers and competitive conditions differ across countries. I would like to know your thoughts on how does any brand tailor-made its global marketing plan?
A lot of these global brands are global because they anchor their proposition on a universal truth, right? And there are some universal truths which help these brands to have these platforms, this presence. But also they pay attention to market-specific consumer nuances. So one of the primary goal for any marketer is to say how I can have one strong positioning that is meaningful across territories. And how do I bring that positioning to a particular market, take into account local market nuances? So I'll give you an example of how it is done in one big category, right?
Right.
We've seen Apple talk about their campaign on the shot on iPhone campaign. You can see that they hashtag it, they put it on billboards, they put it on screens, where the entire focus is on the ability for anyone to take a professional quality photograph rather than speak about the camera features of the phone. And then if you look at the rest of the category, they focus on the pedigree of the camera, saying Carl Zeiss lens, 24 megapixel camera, 20x zoom. So they focus on the functionality and they focus on the specs. So if you really look at it, shot on iPhone, giving normal consumers the ability to take professional level photograph is a consistent universal truth. All of us want to take the best photograph so that we can show off on our social streams. Rather
Right.
than telling me that you have a 12 megapixel camera and 24 megapixel camera, they are anchoring it on a consumer benefit rather than a product function. So, so that is a universal truth. But when they deliver this message in markets, the images that they choose on the billboards, on the campaign, is taking into account the market region for specific interests. And in that way, taking the imagery, the photograph images, even getting people in those countries to send pictures and selecting those pictures to then put back in advertising kind of gives a global platform the ability to deliver a local nuance. You see similar work done by global brands like Pantene, Dove, and Nivea in the beauty care category. They take global truths like having a healthy, shiny hair gives you confidence. So if you have confidence, then you will do a better job and you'll have a better day. So that is structured at a global level. But when it gets executed in the market, they take into account market nuances. What does a healthy hair mean for a consumer in Malaysia? What does a healthy hair mean for a consumer in India? What does a healthy hair mean for a consumer in Middle East? They take that local nuance and bring that to life in the market space. So The strategy is consistent, but the execution is nuanced to local needs. So I think that is the balance that most global brands tend to do. Take a universal truth, but they bring that universal truth to life, taking local nuances.
Right. That's such a wonderful example, Ranga. So the next question is, who is the target audience for media and advertisers brand, and how important it is to target the right audience, to tap the right audience?
Most successful brands globally, right? They spend disproportionate amount of their time trying to understand the brands who. When I say brands, who's the brand talking to? Who's the brand's consumer? And being laser focused on communicating with them has created competitive advantage for marketers. Actually, that is the one biggest differentiator in successful brands and not so successful brands from a marketing perspective.
Right.
So if I have to build on that, in an era where there was scarcity of consumer data, um, one used to look at the point in time studies that we used to have, media index data, one-off consumer research, and try to make an estimation of defining the who, the audience, right? And from a consistency perspective, what we end up used to do is to segment these audiences using demographic and psychographic variables. We used to look at age, gender, socioeconomic class, and they used to play a big part in defining those audiences, especially when you activated them against media, right?
Right.
But the current environment, where there is abundance of consumer signals, the industry has the opportunity to cater to the different stages the consumer is in the purchase funnel, and cater to them with relevant messaging. So instead of looking at audiences through surrogate measures of age, gender, demographics, one should look at the intent signals and the structure, the brand message, and structure the brand messaging to cater to the expressed need of the consumers. So what does it mean, right? It means collecting real-time signals as data points, storing them in the right form, analyzing and presenting them in easy to read and apply form will help brands be more meaningful in their engagements with their consumers. So,
Right.
yeah.
So I agree with you, and so how important it is to engage your existing customers, Ranga, and what methods were used to re-engage your customers while your stint at OMG?
Yeah, I mean, re-engaging is a function. What really happens is you have communicated to a consumer and you want to recontact that consumer because you're trying to move the consumer through a purchase decision funnel, right? So if I have to just refer back to my previous answer, right? Like I mentioned, the importance of reading consumer signals to create meaningful experiences.
Right.
Um, the brands need to nudge the consumer through the next stage. If the consumer is aware and the consumer is not necessarily taking an action to consider, you need to go back and nudge the consumer to say why you need to consider me. And then the consumer has considered you but is not trying you as a brand, again, go and nudge the consumer. So you need to facilitate the process to create a meaningful UX or a purchase funnel experience, right? So retargeting and re-engagement is very critical. To be able to successfully retarget an audience, one needs to have a full understanding of the messaging sequence, messaging frequency, and the context of the consumer. So let me give you an example, right?
Yeah.
If you've already spoken to me as a brand to say, by using this brand, I will be more confident, for example, right? And you've delivered a message to me. I have not taken an action, but that message is in my mind. You want me to take an action. Just repeating the message again to me in a re-engagement strategy, it's going to potentially be a blind spot for me. And if it gets overdone, where there is no frequency cap, it will start irritating me. So what you need to do is to try to understand in my consumer behavior, the signals that I leave out, what is the context in which I am seeking confidence? And then try to uh, show up there and engage with the audience to basically say, if you use my product in this way, you will build confidence, as an example, right?
Right.
So, in that context, one of the simplest questions that brands need to ask themselves in their retargeting strategy is how discoverable and how sociable they are once the awareness part of the job is done. When the consumers are looking for you, are you making yourself discoverable? When the consumers want to talk to you or talk about you, are you making yourself sociable? If the answer to this question is no, then you're in big trouble. You have wasted all your ad dollars driving awareness at the top of the funnel.
Right.
Yeah, so being discoverable, being sociable, and how you do that is a very important angle in your retargeting strategy. Just repeating what you did at the awareness stage is going to be waste of your ad dollars and waste of your effort. In fact, it is going to turn off the client and irritate the client consumer even more.
Right. So one need to re-strategize their conversion funnel in order to have the best customer re-engagement. So, Ranga, what new marketing paths and strategies do the media groups are coming up with to be on par with the competitors, especially during this time of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we all, as personal at a human personal level, at a family level, at a colleague level, at a company, and as well as a corporate level, we've all had a sudden break put in our lives, sometime starting in March, and that sudden break has been in play for about 8 to 10 weeks, depending on which market you are in, right? So, what has COVID done? It has driven pause to people's lives, economic activity, and all of us have had a time to reflect on what is important to us. It's unprecedented, right? Never in the history of the universe where the whole world came to a pause for 8 to 10 weeks, did not allow us to do anything, and by default, we all were in a self-reflection mode. We also started realizing how fragile we are as an ecosystem. And this self reflection, the realization of fragility, is leading to a very important behavioral psychology amongst consumers. We as human beings are starting to prioritize effectiveness over efficiency, quality over quantity, trust trust and familiarity versus price and flirting with products. And these are interesting dynamics that are surfacing. And we keep saying new normal, the abnormal, so on and so forth. But this is the new reality of people wanting to deal with brands and people who they can trust, who they're familiar with, treat themselves to more effective solutions than just efficient solutions, no longer pivoting to cheap but to quality. So, with this new reality, the industry needs to pivot back to brand building. There is a lot of focus in the last 10 years on performance media, which is the bottom of the funnel. How do I convert a consumer? And it became very transactional. Now it is important for brands to refocus on the top of the funnel, to build affinity, to build brand love and brand trust. I believe um, people who will pivot to building preference at the top of the funnel from driving performance, which is conversion at the bottom of the funnel, will have a long and successful growth journey as the industry recovers from COVID.
Right. Right. Also, I'll take this as a note. This is not the new normal. In fact, this is the new reality we are dealing with. So, Ranga, what with most businesses going digital,
Mm,
content consumption has evolved a lot. So, how it has evolved, and like in the past decade for media groups and for the clients of media groups.
sure. It is a very complex space. So I'll try to club it into three groups, right? And show it as three key areas of consumption shifts of content. And all of us, as brand marketers, content creators, content consumers, have to pay attention to this. So broadly, three consumption shifts. One is the acceleration of entertainment on the go has happened. So the content consumption is predominantly on mobile devices. Even if you're at home, if you're four people in the family, the TV is on, everybody is coming to watch TV with their mobile devices in hand, and they're consuming both mobile content as well as TV at the same time. And after a point in time, if you don't have one content that is meaningful for everybody in the family on TV, everybody just diffuses and goes back into their own cocoon of their mobile space to consume content. So entertainment has become on the go. So you start seeing platforms like TikTok where they're creating short form content, um, and consumers are digging that content a lot. Then you see entertainment in social space. With disproportionate amount of time online being spent on social environments, more people are consuming content in the social space than creating. And therefore, if you start looking at publishers, traditional publishers who used to put their articles in newspapers and magazine print versions, have started figuring out how to amplify their content on social platforms and looking at consumer signals, showing the relevant content to the audience so that they are engaging and spending quality time, right?
Right.
In fact, the recent algorithm shift in LinkedIn, which is also a professional social space, if you will, they've actually taken dwell time on your post as an important measure of quality of your post. Rather than just how many people it reaches, how many people spend a lot of time on your content. So we can see those things kind of are getting optimized in the social space. And the third pillar is commerce is powering content, right? With all of us increasing our time spent in commerce environment, not only to browse through brands, but to get contextual content relevant to the purchase needs. There are environments now where content is being created in the commerce space, which consumers starting to engage with.
Right.
So if we were to look at the three big shifts: entertainment on the go, entertainment in social space, and commerce driving content, the three big content consumption shifts that I'm seeing.
Right. So, Ranga, marketing and growth strategies are at one hand, and the tools and technologies at the other. And when both are combined together, it drives the growth of a business. So, what tools and technologies are you using to provide meaningful insights to your customers or in general?
Yeah, in today's data and signal-rich environment, right, there isn't one tool or single source of truth. So one has to pay attention to multiple layers. One has to declutter the noise and synthesize the insights. So, to me, Tina, if I were to rephrase this question, the power is not in the tools and technologies. It is in the human who is able to make sense of these signals to create meaningful insights and not add to the noise. When such a expert doesn't work on these tools and technologies and touches the data in a meaningful way, what you end up doing is only create more noise. So there is an abundance of tools. There are many tools where you don't even have to pay money. There are native signals that you get from big platforms, digital platforms. If you're using their platforms to buy media, you can actually get enriched signals from there, and you can read that and adapt your strategies. And there are paid for tools as well. What is more important is, what do you do with all the data that is flowing in? How are you able to declutter it? How are you able to look at it in a meaningful way to create those meaningful insights is going to be the competitive advantage.
Right. So, what growth strategies and KPIs do you focus usually, for each of your customers?
Sure. Again, Tina, it varies depending on what the brand is trying to achieve, right? Having said that, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is important than ever that marketers pay attention to building brand affinity and connect it to sales. Brands are looking um, the brands are losing their affinity credit, if you will, if there is such a thing called affinity credit, in an accelerated pace because they've been focusing a lot more on efficiency driven marketing rather than effectiveness driven marketing. And they are as this affinity credit declines, um, they risk losing market share to the ones who are focusing on building trust, building affinity, and building preference. So one of the key things that I am propagating to my clients, to my own team, is how do you measure brand trust? How do you measure brand affinity? How do you measure brand preference? Now, how do you link that to sales? Other kind of KPIs that we are working towards.
Right. So,
Mm.
Ranga, very soon, Google is planning to end support for third-party cookies. Now, this is fueling much of the digital advertising ecosystem. So, how is the advertising and marketing sector planning to deal with it?
It's a very current and meaningful question that a lot of brands are trying to tackle. Having said that, many have already started moving away from cookie targeting. They're sharpening their saw on collecting zero and first party data. They're looking at associative audiences coming from their zero and first party data. And from there, they're building a base on a brick by brick manner to actually create scale of audience. Uh, so brands that get their act together in creating this ecosystem of leveraging their own consumer data first. People who have interacted with the brands, how do I build that data? Having interacted with me, I know you better, and therefore I understand your environment better. And then looking at affiliate audiences from your own users, building that reach is what going to be meaningful in an environment where the cookie is crumbling.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very meaningful and important answer that audience must listen to.
Thank you.
Now, any parting thought that you would like to share with the audience, concerning those who want to take up a career in the advertising and marketing industry and who are budding learners out there? So, what are your thoughts with them?
Sure. You know what is changing the world, right? The world is being changed by massive technological advancements, right? And it's changing consumer behavior. Consumer behavior is then changing marketing behavior, and there is a lot of high energy activity happening in that space. And an environment like advertising and marketing gives an individual the ability to be at the cusp of this transformation. The changing consumer behavior thanks to technology as an enabler. We are able to sit at the confluence, and in the advertising world, especially in the media specialized ecosystem, we are actually sitting at the confluence of technology, humanity, and commerce.
Right.
Being in that cusp and in the confluence, you get a ringside view of what's next. And if you dig that ringside view of where the world is moving, this is the place to be. If you respond well, and if you have enough influence, you might be even able to play a part in the transformation. So I fundamentally believe that it's a great place to be able to view as well as change how the world engages in the future. Yeah, so come join the industry.
Great, great, Ranga. That was such a wonderful and brilliant podcast session with you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ranganathan, ex CEO at Omnicom Media Groups. Thank you so much, Ranga.